One of the videos I've been looking forward to making is about fabric wrapping a 3D print. Now if you have a look at this, this is the base of a speaker project we made, and what it is it's a 3D print that's been wrapped in material. This kind of visual style was made popular with items like the Amazon Echo and the Google Home Hub, and it's an appearance that a lot of our students want to replicate. So in this tutorial what I'm going to do is compare things like spray mount to contact adhesive, to talk about the benefits and problems with using each of these, and then I talk a little bit about what fabric to use, because your fabric selection, the weight of your fabric and the general stretch in your fabric actually has quite a big sway over how easy or not this process is. The only other area to touch on is the orientation of your 3D print, and whether you choose to print the correct way up with support material on the base that will need removing, or you print your print upside down, so actually you've got a smoother face to mount to. So what I'm going to do is hopefully take a couple of these prints, clean them both up, and we're going to compare spray adhesive to contact adhesive. The first thing to consider when thinking about wrapping a product is an A or a B surface. This 3D print, although not completely cleaned up, was printed on an Ultimaker 3. This meant it has dissolvable support materials, and although it has a bit of warping, both sides are what you'd call an A surface. They're both clean, they're both neat, and if we were to wrap the fabric over it, what we'll end up with is a nice surface finish. The second print I want to show you, the A surface is actually the internal detail. So depending on which way up you print your print, you end up with an A surface if you're using something like an Ultimaker 2 or earlier, and the B surface, your B surface has the support material attached to it. And actually this is a really poor quality print that's come out. There's a lot of warping, there's a lot of marks, and one of the things that you might notice is if you stretch your fabric over this, if your fabric isn't thick enough, you're going to get some of those details coming through. You can see along here that shadow line of where we've got the gap. So one thing to consider is, what is your model showing? If you want to show the internal detail, to show a proof of principle, how your model works, you may want to print this way and consider a slightly thicker fabric, because a thicker fabric will hide a lot of those marks. I'm not saying it will do it perfectly, but it will hide a lot of those details. Or if you want the external surface, print with your support material on the inside, and then what you'll find is that you get a nice finished model. Now it does struggle to focus on this, but what you'll see is a nice finished model. The other bit to consider when printing is actually your lip detail. On this there is a lip and groove, and what I've actually done is I've extended the gap between the lip and groove to about 1mm. So when we go to put the top part on, there is a gap in between this outer part and this inner part where the fabric can naturally sit. And what that does is gives you quite a nice crisp edge to run around, as a product would be. The alternate way to do it would be to have a lip and groove where the part sits into it. Now the advantage of this, other than this not being particularly well cleaned up, is that by the motion of pushing this second part into this first part, what I'm actually going to do when I do that is I'm going to grab the fabric and pull it down, making the fabric tighter. So this could end up with a better surface finish, which is another thing to consider when making a model like this. When doing either version of this wrapping, what we want to do is have more fabric than we need. So what I would always recommend is cutting a slightly oversized section out. It is wasteful, but what it allows you to do is guarantee that you're going to cover all the surfaces, because what you want is you want that fabric to pull up and around. The worst thing that could happen at this stage is actually that you get part way through wrapping your print and you find out that you don't have enough to cover one of the edges. The other thing to consider at this stage is actually the shape of your model. One of the reasons I'm doing this tutorial with domes is they're fairly easy. I can pull it up and I can wrap it, and one of the things you'll notice as I start to pull this in is I start to get rumples. I'll start to get ruffles in the fabric. Now, the lower the height of your dome, and your height is what I would describe as the distance from the base to the top, the more chance you have to pull those out to stretch your fabric. And again, that's where fabric selection comes into it, whether you've got something open weave, loose like this, or something that's a tighter weave, thicker fabric with less give in it. This will be more likely, I would imagine, to have ripples, ruffles in it than this will. And that's another reason for having a couple of these prints and trying it, to see which one ruffles, which one doesn't. So what I'm going to do with this first print is I'm going to use the thinner fabric. I'm going to try the thin fabric first, I'm going to try spray mount, then I'm going to try contact adhesive, which is a higher strength bond, and I'm going to try the thicker fabric. When I go to spray it, what I'll do is I'll generally spray the top area, sit the fabric over it and flatten it over areas like the feet and the vent. I'm not going to worry about this charging port too much, I'm just going to stick the top area down. Once that's set, I'm then going to lift it up and you'll see I'll apply spray around the edge, I'll start stretching it over, and then hopefully I can use this jig to clamp it into position. And when that's clamped into position, I'll hopefully tighten it up. So let's start. Now this may be a little hard to see with a white model on white paper, but I've put it down to protect the workbench. The other thing I'd like to say is whenever you're spraying, I will put on a respirator, but you should spray outdoors, you should spray in a well ventilated area, even if it's something like spray mount. So give the can a shake, put on a mask, and what I've done is I've worked in all 4 planes, so I know I get into all the areas. I know that this is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge because spray mount's slightly lower tack and this is quite a poor print. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this on, and actually what I've got on this print is I've got the ability to work into these 4 feet and start spreading it out. Now what I've done is I've dropped it on in the middle, but what you'll notice is it's not completely square, which is another reason why I would recommend making this oversized. And I'm just working it down my edges. One of the things you'll note is if you put on too much glue, and this will be a problem with the contact adhesive, is it will seep through your fabric, so you might want to wear gloves. Now feeling around on this, that's where my charging port is, so I know I'm going to have to cut that area out, and that's where my 4 feet are. Now what you'll notice is that this is sticking, but it's not stuck to my edges. So what I can do now is I can lift this up. Now what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to lift it up, move my sticky mat out of the way, and I'm just going to check that I've got enough fabric on all edges. And what I'm probably going to do now is spray the rest of it and start stretching it and working it round. It's a bit of a fiddly process. Every time I've done this, you just have to work with your part. As you'll see, it's stuck quite well to the bottom. So I'm going to bring back in the paper, spray it and start working it in. Once I've worked into somewhere where I'm happy, I'm going to get my scissors, I'm going to trim off all the excess. So when I put on this clamping piece and use that to clamp it down to hold it tight, hopefully there isn't too much fabric in there to ruffle up. So again, let's bring in something to spray onto, and then with this, just work my way around. Give the spray mount a couple of minutes. One of the other things you can do, which is quite useful, is bring back in your can and place your item on top of it. Now I know the legs get in the way a little bit with this, but what I've actually got now is something I can work over as a dome and start stretching, start pulling it in. When you get a ruffle or a ripple like that, start stretching it out and working it around. The more you can pull it and stretch it to the edges, the more you will actually get a better quality print at the end of it, and hopefully using this thinner material, what we'll actually find is we can stretch out those ruffles, those ripples in the fabric until they're on the inside. So you'll see as I'm working round, again a few more, pulling it through, pulling it tight, again pulling it through, pulling it tight, trying to get these to come through. And what I'm not doing is I'm not working my way round. The reason I'm not pulling it around in this direction is what I don't want to do is get the fabric to all bunch up at the end to end up with a pleat like this. So what I want to do is keep trying to just pull it in. Now as you get towards the end, the chances of getting these little ruffles gets higher and higher, like the one there, and then I end up with something like a pleat like this at the end. Now what I'm going to do with those is I'm just going to lay it flat, so move this glued part out of the way, and I'm going to start removing an excess of this fabric. I'm still leaving about 10, maybe 15 mil on the inside of this, and the reason is I need something to grab, to pull up, and also I want something for this to crimp to. But getting rid of some of this weight will hopefully allow us to stretch out the fabric that last little bit, that last percentage, to make it look neat. What you might also consider at this stage is whether your model has an A and a B surface. And what I mean by that is some models sit one way round. They'll have a front, they'll have a screen. And if your model has that, make sure you start at the front and work your way to the back. So any pleats you get in the model will sit at the back. Now we've got a lot of that fabric weight out of there. Again, let's start just seeing if I can get something like that. And it's just, look, if you stretch it up, you actually pull that crease until it's off the top of the model. If it's off the top of the model, then it's not going to be visible. So get that rubbish out of the way. Keep working it up. Keep working it up. We're getting nearly there. That's quite a nasty pleat. Again, pull it up and over the top. Working around. It's quite a nasty one there. And I just keep working in a circle until I'm mostly happy with this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to start at one edge, start pushing it down, feeding in my excess fabric, making sure it's all fed in as nicely as it can be, and then hopefully there's enough tolerance to force this in. And in forcing this in, it's going to pull out some of those last few pleats. So there's quite a nasty one there. I wonder if there's anything I can do about that. So let's just pop this out, see if there's anything I can do about it. While the glue's still wet, there's still a chance just to pull out those last few tiny bits. And if that pulls out those, that pulls out that. Let's push this in and give this a go. Oops, nearly there. And get that in again. Voila. Okay, so what have we got? Well, we've got a lid that doesn't fit. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Right. And what you'll see with this is actually small pleat there. We've got a fairly good fit. So what I can do now is I can leave this part to dry. And from what it was, from something with these horrible marks on, going to something like this is quite a good success. I'm really quite happy with that. So please come back for the next video. In the next video we're going to do the exact same process, but what we're going to do is try doing this with a thicker fabric and with some contact adhesive as opposed to spray adhesive. The nice things about the spray adhesive are it's easy to get hold of, it's got a low tack, so it's got a long working time, and actually it does have quite a good hold on it. So thank you for watching.